Hello, this is Nate from Zootgamer.com, the place for getting your gaming guides, journalism, and sharing your love of gaming with others, bringing you all the information you need to know about Heroes of Might and Magic 3 HD. The game came out January 29th of this year, nearly 16 years after the initial game's release. With a brand new game coming out in the series in September, let's take some time to get more in touch with the series and see if this HD remaster is worth your time and money. The Might and Magic franchise is rather colossal at this point. They have numerous series with many installments in each of them. Their core series is just called Might and Magic, which is a dungeon exploration based game where you control a party fighting and looting through dungeons. From their core franchise and lore, they have other spin-off games from this series that follow similar storylines but employ different forms of gameplay, from a Dark Souls Elder Scrolls-esque game to an almost Bejeweled-like game. The games not only change in gameplay but also quality, with some being regarded as masterpieces to others being considered forgettable to just plain bad. But the only history you really need to know is of the Heroes of Might and Magic series. This series' installments have been pretty basic, numbered from 1 to 6, with a new game coming out soon. For a series with so many games over the years, it has been surprisingly fresh from each installment, changing things up just enough while still sticking to what's good. The series has mostly had positive improvements, and the remastering of this game makes it interesting to compare to the many games that have been released over the years. But to get to know the changes better, you'll need to know the games and how they play. One thing that has not changed throughout the years is the style of gameplay. The game is a turn-based strategy game. The best comparison I can think of is like a more combat-focused Civilization. You still develop your cities, but instead of in-depth building systems and focusing on sciences and other things like that, you focus on smaller things such as just small settlements and building up your army. Instead of focusing on the cultural or other aspects of winning, the only way to win is through war. Starting out, the game opens up with what I believe to be the original opening of the game, but scaled down to look a little bit higher resolution. Unfortunately, 3D animation has not aged well from where it was. It doesn't look very good, and quite frankly is not very tasteful. Thankfully, you can skip past this to the menu. The menu is again nothing remarkable, but it does look nice and is simple enough for anyone to navigate around. There are 3 main modes of play: the single player games, the multiplayer games, and the campaigns. Honestly, all game modes are fun and equally all balanced out for what you like. Campaigns are story and progression based, having multiple games in them progressing through a story that gets harder and harder. Single player is for someone who doesn't want to commit to playing through all the different levels, or just isn't as good as some other players. Because when you're playing single player, you can select your difficulty, which can make it much easier for new players. Of course, multiplayer is also great, but you have to have enough friends, or find random strangers who also have copies of the game, plus there is a good amount of waiting involved. To really get a feel for what the game is, you can start with any of these modes since they'll all play out the same. In most single-player games or multiplayer games, you'll start out with generally one character and one castle. Your class and amount of monsters you have or starting bonuses depend from game to game. Ultimately though, most will start out with a basic hero and a basic castle. At first, when you get into the game, it's a bit more than overwhelming. I recommend starting out by just exploring with your character or looking around inside your castle and learning what all the buildings do. Then you can learn about upgrading your castle, finding resources, and fighting. Once you get more accustomed to the game, you'll start to learn more strategies and you'll get a better feel for what will help you win faster. Just a few tips to get you started though. You want to focus on getting as many creatures and as much money from your city as possible. Some games you start out with lower gold, then you want to upgrade your castle so that you're making more gold every day. You might have to deposit a lot, but you will quickly get that back from how much your gold is increased. Now, I know just from the sound of this, the game does sound like it's very meticulous and might not be too fun, but it really doesn't have to be. The game can be really as easy as you want, or as difficult as you want. The cool part is that you can be very careful and plot out all your purchases, moves, and attacks in the game, or you can just casually play, do whatever feels right, and just kinda go with it. It fits well for all skill levels of gamers. Now, as I mentioned earlier, you have to manage your money in the form of gold. You also have raw materials, which are wood and ore, which are a bit easier to get than rare materials, which include mercury, gems, crystals, and sulfur. Buildings inside your castles will cost various amounts of each of these, and you'll find some classes focus more on certain rare materials or certain raw materials. To get resources, you can either find them in mines, which will produce new resources daily, or you can find resources scattered around the map, or use the trade system if you desperately need resources. Everything then feeds into ultimately building up your army and conquering your opposition. The collection of resources and building up your castles, it all helps to make your army better. You can then take that army and conquer new areas that had stronger monsters, or clear out oppositions, get their castles, and then destroy their armies. Now, these creatures are not like Pokemon though. You don't do anything to train your monsters, you just buy them more and upgrade them in your castle. Now, there is a lot more to monsters, as they really probably are the most complex part of the game. Now, there's different tiers of monsters, and the amount of them that there is pretty great. It's always one of my favorite parts of the game, getting to see the new Heroes of Might and Magic game, because the monsters get their art updated, some get more powerful, some new monsters are brought in, and it's really quite fun because each class has a different theme, and when they introduce new classes, there can be a whole new set of monsters. It's really quite fun. Now, once you actually get into a fight, you'll be moved into a battle screen. The cool thing about these is that each is unique to the environment that you're currently in. Each creature takes up one hexagonal square in the environment, but larger ones do take up two. Then, depending on your creature's stats and other spells and abilities, you may get to move sooner or later than other monsters. Now, the game could get very vanilla here in the battles, but with all the differences, each creature manages to feel pretty unique, and you'll definitely find your favorite. Certain shooters have explosive blasts and Dragon's Attack going over 2 squares that allow for double attacks. The combat is probably the most fun part of the game, especially when you get your castle fully upgraded and have yourself a huge army. But this game is not just Heroes of Might and Magic 3, this is Heroes of Might and Magic 3 Remastered HD. What did they add with this supposed remastering? Well, here's where we actually get into the cons of the game. The whole game is missing a good amount of things. Neither of the 2 expansions have been included because supposedly their source code was lost. There are 13 missing campaigns then, and a whole faction has been left out due to probably remastering budget cuts or a time loss. I briefly played Heroes 3 when I was younger. I mostly stuck with Heroes 2. But I was sincerely confused when I started playing this, because the faction I remember playing the most was completely gone. There also is no longer a random map generator. So it definitely is missing a lot in the remaster, but what does it do right? Well, the remaster allows for the running of the game in a 16:9 format, and it does touch up the textures pretty well. The outside of the game looks really good. The only real complaint about the touch-up that I have is that the creature sprites look kind of off. This really, though, I think would be due to the 3D models that were used when the original game came out, because before that, in the first and second, they were using 2D sprites, which, quite frankly, if you look at now, still look amazing. But the switch over to 3D models that were then turned into pictures, they were kind of awkward. The lower resolution helped hide this though, but then with the touch-up of what they were actually supposed to look like, you can see that some things just don't look great. But the game does include something really awesome, which I have to say is probably my favorite feature added in, is the switch from the old to the touched up. You can go into the menu and just hit a button that will switch to the older graphics, and then hit a button that'll switch back. Unfortunately, hitting to the old won't get you that missing faction back, but it still is cool to see the comparison between what the castles look like and what monsters look like before and after they touch them up. The final sin though, what gets everyone really riled up, seems to be the price. The game is $15 on Steam, which really isn't unreasonable, but if you aren't overly particular about having all your revamped HD sprites and everything, you can get the game on Good Old Games for just $10, which includes all the original content, including the missing faction as well as the 2 expansions, for $10. Many reviews on Steam point this out and give the illusion that the game is awful, but this really isn't the case. I only had a short run-in with glitches, and the game does look good, but why pay more for less? If you're interested in this game, I highly recommend checking it out. It's really a great way to get into the series, and quite frankly, the game is wonderful. Check it out on GOG for the classic version with everything, or wait for the Steam HD version to go on sale. I personally love the series, and I highly recommend you play at least one game in it. Thank you for watching, and check out Zootgamer.com.